Isso daqui é carta?
Welcome, bem-vindos. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to this Brazil Lab event. My name is João Biehl. I teach in the Department of Anthropology and also co-direct the Brazil Lab together with my wonderful colleague and friend, Pedro Meira Monteiro.
That's sitting.
So welcome. When men throw me into the air, I'm already far away. A young woman named Catarina, who was left as mad to die in a zone of abandonment in southern Brazil, and who made me into an anthropologist, wrote in her dictionary, so that I don't forget the words. Mm-hmm. Just as the ex-human resisted capture and engendered her own escape, so does the artist in her art, in the act of her art. In the process, she gives us a new language through which we can find a zone of proximity to the violence of history and its haunting silences, along with a lingering otherwise, how things were and could have been, how one desires and simulates they will be. We are greatly honored and delighted to welcome Adriana Varejão, one of the world's most imaginative and probing artists, to Princeton and to the Brazil Lab, while on her way to an opening at the Contemporary Arts Center in New Orleans. Through her vastly evocative works and physically arresting artistic practice in multiple media, Adriana Varejão presents incisive reinterpretations and reflections of the complex nature of Brazilian history and the plights and becomings of its peoples. Varejão's work is held in major collections at the Guggenheim, the Tate Modern, the Museu de Arte do Rio de Janeiro, among others. She also has a permanent pavilion dedicated to her work at the Inhotim Center of Contemporary Art. My strategy is to select existing images and recreate them, Adriana Varejão said a couple of years ago in a conversation with the director of the Gagosian Gallery that represents her. Quote, I prefer this as a way of engaging history, of finding images and picking up fragments. The fragment is an open structure. Mm-hmm. That is, surviving traces that the artist exposes as open history and creative alterity. Wrestling with both force and desire, we have in Adriana Varejão's artwork a reorientation of perception and a resistance to death. Today's event would not have been possible without the amazing Lilia Schwarcz and the process of mutual translation that the anthropologist and the artist concocted together. In the past decade, Lilia and Adriana have collaborated in multiple initiatives, one of them the awesome book Pérola Imperfeita, Imperfect Pearl, on how the artist rereads history and the possibilities engendered by this creative uptake. Last week, we heard from Lily. We had the great pleasure of hearing from her about the extraordinary Afro-Atlantic exhibition she curated. Lily is a professor of anthropology at the University of São Paulo and a visiting professor here at Princeton. And we are so happy to have Lily back here today, leading this Brazil Lab conversation on decolonizing art with the wondrous and luminous Adriana Varejão. Mm-hmm. So let's give Adriana Varejão our warmest welcome to Princeton, and to Lily our continuous gratitude.
Do I have to go there? Can I speak here? So we are going to speak here. No? Okay. So, it's my great honor. Can you hear me? Yes. Is it working? Mm-hmm. Not so well. Yep? Yep. Okay.
It's working.
It's working? Okay. It's my great honor and joy to introduce Adriana Varejão, one of the most important contemporary artists of our time. Adriana is Brazilian, as you know, Carioca da Gema, as you might know, and she lives in Rio. But I want to introduce Adriana with a more personal note. I met Adriana by chance. Some years ago, I was on my way to Rio de Janeiro, and as I boarded the plane, I noticed a young family.
Eu acho que está muito baixo.
Tá baixo? It's not enough.
Eu acho que
Do you prefer me to go there?
This is just for the camera.
Okay,
so maybe,
so-
yeah.
Great, okay, good. Okay, good, great.
Let me continue.
Great.
Very good story.
So, I met Adriana by chance. Some years ago, I was on my way to Rio de Janeiro, and as I boarded the plane, I noticed a young family, a beautiful mother, a father, and a happy daughter. I also noted that the wife kept staring at me. I thought no more about it. But a string of coincidences was only just beginning. As it happened, I ended up sitting right behind them. That was when the woman, Adriana, turned around to face me and said, very directly, "My name is Adriana Varejão. I read your book and I want you to write an article about my work." I recognized the artist immediately, but found it strange that she would recognize me. So I responded, "I'm afraid I'm not who you think I am. I'm just at most an anthropologist interested in art, or an historian, but not an art historian, or even an art critic." Adriana replied immediately, "I read your book, Spectacle of Races, and that's why I want you to write something about my art." I was at a bit of a loss and let the matter drop. Some months later, I was invited by Isabel Diegues, an editor of the arts publishing house Cobogó, based in Rio de Janeiro, to contribute to a book about Varejão's art. I responded as I had responded to Adriana on the plane, and Isabel replied, "But Adriana, she wants to teach you about her art." To make a long story short, I decided to go to Rio de Janeiro, where I began a series of classes with the artist. We would meet and discuss her work. I would watch her working. She gave me open access to her archive, and most importantly, we became friends. I love Adriana's stories, and especially her way of translating formal information. In fact, I was starting to realize that, at least in my case, the boundaries between the author of knowledge and the subject of knowledge were really not so clear at all. Before my eyes, everything transformed to fit her word and work. A reference from a book, an old picture, documents, ceramics, research projects, anything could trigger a new piece. Anything could be translated into art. At that time, I was particularly interested in how Adriana creates false tiles in her work, not tales. Tales also, but tiles. And transformed them into allegories, perhaps the best instrument for difficult communication between such diverse settings like China, Brazil, and Portugal. Tiles have historically been used as part of a very lucrative business that united different parts of these three continents, and at the same time, as symbols of different cultures. This was what I call, and what we thought we could call, parody. Is the best term from which to begin understanding Adriana's work. The artist does not create a new tile. She creates art as a tile. Better saying, a false tile is not false because it becomes real in a new work. Adriana Varejão can cheat with art. She creates tiles in her paintings in order to make them real tiles. This is one of her means toward poiesis, her way of showing that in art, everything is a parody of the self. For in Adriana's work, tiles were also a way to express the ambiguities of colonization. insisting that colonization created suffering and leisure at the same time. What emerges in this work is a complex and ambiguous process combining violence and pleasure, death and miscegenation. Colonization in Adriana's work is addressed alongside cannibalization as a way to understand order and disorder, present and future, exchange and violence. The concept of cannibalization is prevalent in both Adriana art itself and in the way she comments art. It comments upon it. Drawing on modernist reference like Oswald de Andrade, but even Jean de Lery documents in the 16th century, she transformed meanings into images and images into other images. More than a biological necessity, cannibalization was a way of managing questions of transformation and an important way of creating networks of communication, or being other, being the enemy, or incorporating the enemy's strength. There is a substantial difference between the concept of anthropophagy, symbolic consumption, and cannibalism, the physical consumption of human flesh, of which Adriana was very much aware. The former has a ritual meaning, the later a biological one. The crucial point is that the Amerindians did not eat their enemies because they were hungry. Eating the strongest prisoner was a way of receiving the strong spirit and also a means of exchanging symbols, men, and messages. Cannibalism is in fact a central theme in Adriana's work, or Adriana Varejão's art. In her work, one can easily locate quotations, images, and documents from various times, but in all cases, and at the same time, what is visible is a parody, a duplication of the document, a mirror that can reproduce, but can also distort or duplicate. But let me return once more to my relationship with the artist and then finish this presentation. My first sensation after those initial classes was a kind of vertigo. Who was this expert here? Who was the native in the brand new situation? I was afraid that I would be cannibalized by Adriana. Instead of simply studying Adriana, she had started studying me and to translate my own work for her own purposes in art. But let me really finish here with a final event. When I decided to accept the invitation to write an article and later a book together with her, I could not stop thinking in why Adriana enjoyed so much reading my book, Spectacle of the Races. And then, one day, I asked Adriana again, can you explain why? And then, Adriana said that my book had shown her that during 19th century, scientific racial theories saw the eyes as means of measuring madness, criminality, and geniality. She has found that history, he said, terrific. I was so disappointed because I knew I had never written anything on that subject. The information itself was correct, part of a series of phrenological models used during the 19th century in Brazil and elsewhere. It was also part of a wide range of models known as racial theories or even a commentator, that was the argument. In short, Adriana thought she had read something in my book that wasn't actually there. She cannibalized me and my work in the same way she cannibalized other sources, mixing all of them together. She reads, sees, and studies and develops her work by translating it into another art, into art. That is a very original way Adriana produces art. recreating everything she can, translating and cannibalizing. So let's start our conversation with Adriana Varejão, talking about one of her series. We discussed the name of the series, but I cannot remember. Figura de convite. So can you come and you will talk about this? And then
Entrance figure. Yeah.
what's the name?
Entrance figure.
Entrance.
Welcome figure.
Welcome figure. So Adriana, please. Okay, she made it again. It's not the one I said, it's another one. It's proposal of a catechism.
Hi, bon appetit. So, thank you. Thank you. So we will begin with this series, Proposal for Catechesis, which was a show that I made in 1993. And so my main source for this was the Theodore de Brie images of the anthropophagical ritual. It's funny because Theodore de Brie made this book that you must be familiar, America, which was a bestseller in Europe. But Theodore de Brie have never been into America. So all the prints he made, the drawings, the prints, were based on other prints and sources. So that first image shows the death, and then the dismembering, and then, yes, and then the cook. And these figures, as you must know, I don't know if I should say that in a history department or whatever. This is Hans Staten. So he shows Hans Staten, and he based basically on Hans Staten figures to make these. Hans Staten was captured by the Tupinambás and stayed for 9 months. And everything that we know about it the first source was through Hans Staten. And so we have these images which are very strong. No? As Lilia told, the ritual and the idea of observing the other through eating. It was not about eating, biological, but symbolic. Actually, the wars between the Tupinambás were because of that, because of hierarchy, and it's not because of possesses or whatever. So this is a tile, a panel of tile, Portuguese tiles. All the tiles that we have in Brazil came from Portugal. Different from Mexico, we did not produce any tiles in Brazil. So we had to buy and import everything from Portugal. So all the tiles that we have in Brazil from 17th, 18th, 19th century are Portuguese. So we have these kind of panels in the buildings, palaces and churches. This is an example of a very important place for me, which is Convent of São Francisco in Salvador from 18th century, where I took many references to my work as well. So this is the painting that I produce. The title is Proposal for a Catechism, where the Indians are teaching the catechism to the Europeans. So basically we have a ritual here where the figure of the Christ is being killed to be consumed. This is an oil on canvas painting, so it's a simulation of tiles. I never use real tiles. And also it's a diptych that simulates a page of a book. So basically, the first time I left Brazil, my first international trip, I have 21 years old. So everything that I knew about art before, it was through books. In Brazil, we not have access to the originals. If we want to see a Da Vinci, we cannot go, we don't have a Louvre or a Metropolitan to go. So I used to collect books, and was the way that I learned art. So books were always very important to me. So that's why in this painting I also refer to books. Like if you see, there is a difference of blue that you never know in the reproduction which is the real color. So there is a difference of it, and it simulates 2 pages. And this painting is also cuts and have a kind of volume and a kind of carnalidade. Carnality.
Yeah.
It's like a history written or printed in the body, not only. So this piece of paper is a little bit death. Espesso? Death.
Thick.
Thick. No?
Thick, yes. So as I told you, these are simulating of tiles. They are painted on oil. And that's the cuts where you can see like this physicality of the painting. On the face of the angels, in some tiles that were glued on the surface through oil, the very thick oil painting. And here we, to finish our lesson, our catechism lesson, I took this from Evangelho de São João, São Johan, que manducati-me carne, bebite-me sangue, illa mane e ego in illo. Quem é que sabe o Evangelho para vocês para inglês? Who drinks from my, who eats from my body and drinks from my blood, it's in me and I am. So it's it's this idea of crossing 2 different cultures, and we have like this time the Tupinambá teaching the catechesis to the Europeans, not so it's a reverse history, no? It's like taking the tiles, which is a Portuguese symbol, no, a Portuguese signals, better, and giving it back in a totally different way, telling a totally different story. So this is a different kind of tile panel, from a church in Setúbal, Portugal, 17th century, where you can see like the rosa mística, mystic rose, and this priest, this figure of the priest, a saint, I don't remember which saint was that. I think São Francisco, yes. Having this revelation, no? Through his mouth, going out through his mouth. Here we have 2 examples of parts of the bodies, as I would say. The first one is a reliquary of the arm of São Bento. It is in the São Bento Monastery in Salvador, Brazil, Bahia. It's 17th century. And this is a tile panel from the Church of Santo Amaro, Portugal, 17th century. So I will not explain what is a reliquary and what is a what else, ex voto. No, this is a kind of ex voto. And this is the second part of that painting. So again, simulating pages of a book. You have the caption here, a part of a caption.
Yeah.
You have different colors. And this is the figure of the Indian, like that I substitute from the saint, the San Francisco. That are like anthropophagical ritual in the landscape. There is a figure that it's an apparition that you cannot realize what it exactly is. And that's the relics. So we have the leg that I took from the tile panel, the arm that I painted there, and a plate. So this is the figure, a detail of the Indian.
And cannibalism.
And cannibalism seen on the back.
Yeah.
And this is the detail of the plate that showing the Tupinambás dancing around the apparition of the Christ. So this painting is a diptych. This called apparitions and relics. So this is a book that, as you see, I used a lot in my studio. It's painted and full of stains of oil, and we're showing tiles that normally are on kitchens in Portugal from 17th century. So you can see the games that are hanged. That is a kind of trompe-l'oeil of hanging games. And this is the painting that I made. It's a whole series called Proposal for a Catechism.
Yeah.
So this is the body of the Christ being hanged as a game to be eaten, consumed. It would be better. And so again, there are simulating of tiles in trompe-l'oeil, even the cracks. And the fragments of the body. If you see the head is painted, like in the anthropophagical ritual, and other parts of the body. So this was made in oil on canvas as well, and the scale is like the scale of the body, more or less.
Yeah.
These parts has the real scale. Now, entrance figures serious or welcome figures,
Yeah.
we would say. So there are many buildings in Portugal where there are those figures that kind of welcoming, inviting people to come. And sometimes they say sentences, no? Quem procura vós me ser. So this is the noble house in Lisbon, Portugal. This is 18th century. No?
It's very interesting, the translation there. Who are you looking
Who
for?
are you looking for?
Right, so these are figures that are in the openings, in the entrance of the houses, right? So,
Noble houses.
yeah, noble houses. Yeah.
Again, another example. So very well dressed and Palace of Santo Antão do Tojal in Lisbon, Portugal, 18th century. So this is our. This figure was the woman of the Picts. It's in America, in Theodore de Brie book that I showed before.
Yeah.
This is the date of the book, no? And so Lilian, tell me about the woman of the Picts. It's a Celtic tradition.
Some
or
people
they
think they
nobody
are
knows
Celtic.
exactly.
Nobody knows. It's like a projection that the Brie tried to create this image of the women And it says, it's a kind of a tradition, but no one can prove. We tried hard, no, Adriana, that they were very good. The women were very good on like warriors and also painting their bodies. So Adriana, she's going to explain, she mixed the image of this warrior with the witches. No?
Yes, the idea, it's funny that these figures that are European are in a book called America. But in a way, it's a Europe that even the Europeans didn't know. It's a projection of the exotic.
But you can see the castles in the back.
Yes, you can see the castles on the back. So again, John White showed the figures of warrior of Pict in British Museum. And again, Theodore de Brie.
And they were, of course, cannibals.
Yes.
Cannibals.
But they cut heads.
Cut heads like
so I took the figure of the woman of the pigs, but now she's inviting to an anthropophagical banquet. So this is also a 2 meters by 2 meters painting. It simulates tiles. It's not really tiles, it's painted on oil. And that part is like a part of a wall, the white wall on the background. So it's a parody of the figure of the Picts with all the figures of the anthropophagical ritual on the back. Can you see? Yes. Maybe? Oh. The details from the images that we first saw.
And then women, they are eating a lot.
Yes, the women are the protagonists in this banquet, yes. A second painting, entrance figure, welcome figure as well. And this time it's a Pict woman. And she's holding my own head. It's a kind of self-portrait. And so you have simulation of tiles, but instead of flowers in the tiles, and you have also these tiles that simulate marbles. They are very common. All these tiles I took from reference, from Portuguese tiles. So this is a detail. So we have pieces of body, legs, hands, stomach.
Cannibal flowers.
Huh?
Cannibal flowers.
Could be. So finishing the proposal for a catechism. There is a Z series that I think it's nice to mention. It's Tones and Incision series that I began in '98. I always open series, but I never finish. So there is only the opening dates because I go back to them anytime. So these are 2 paintings were made on canvas, aluminum. So to hold all this materiality and to be stead, I used to use aluminum, to mold. And so the tile, the first surface, it's a pattern of a Portuguese. Both are patterns of Portuguese tiles. And this first surface is opened, and there is this materiality inside that simulates meat. So it's made of very thick layers of oil paint. And it's funny because oil paint never dries. It's like a closed tube. When you have lost the contact with the oxygen, inside is still like wet. So it's the case of this. So it's a totally different surface and materiality. In one side you have order, you have previsibility, and in the other side you have materiality, something that is sensual, voluptuous, chaotic, irrational, I would say. Or so you have two surfaces folding one in each other. So this is a view of the painting from the side, so we can see the volumes. Detail, that is all, everything is painted. And then you have this second layer that comes from the back to the surface. And this is the inside surface. Oil paint.
And you called it tongs, right? So they have the shape of a tongue.
Yes.
Can you tell a little bit about that?
It's, I think it's a form of a tongue. That's something that comes from inside and goes outside. It's internal order that suddenly, and it's kind of wet as well.
Yes, wet. Can you tell us the format of how big they are? More of this work? More or less, just to give them an idea, because it's really big.
Yes, it's
like
yes,
1 meter and 2 meters, something like that, isn't it?
Yes, 2 meters. Yeah. It's more or less, it's the scale of a tile.
Yeah.
No, the tile and it's the scale of a tile. So in a human scale, it would be like here.
Yeah. Then you have a tongue with a human scale, so it's very impressive.
So this is because the tiles are kind of skin of the buildings. No, they are like the surface. So this is association of it's a painting, azulejaria em carne viva. The name. It's I don't know how to translate that. It's azulejaria em carne viva. Flashlight.
Terracotta tiles, right?
Yeah.
Flashlight.
Flashlight in a tile.
Tiles, yes. And tile panels, azulejaria. It's hard to translate tile panels anyway. So this simulates like a skin of a person. So you have this tattooed, this layer that's it's skin that is tattooed and it's glued on the canvas that is painted like tiles. It's not tiles, painted like a tile. And it's glued on the surface with this flash of oil paint.
And contaminating. No?
Yes, and contaminating the whole aseptic background. Yes. So the last series that I want to show you, it's the Yanomami, the spirit of the forest, at the Fondation Cartier. It was a project that I took part in 2003, began in 2003. So basically, the artists were invited to visit Demini, a Yanomami village, called Watoric. It's in Rondônia. So just to have an idea here, where is the Yanomami reservation? Roraima, yes. It's on the border of Roraima and Venezuela.
Very famous these days.
Yes. So it's about 28,000 people that lives in there. 5 different languages, idioms, Yanomami.
Yeah.
And we went to, I went with Bruce Albert. All the artists used to go with the anthropologist, Bruce Albert. And each one go, como é que é? Cada vai de uma vez.
At a time, each
At a
one
time,
at a time.
Each one at a time. So
Yeah.
it was not a group of an
That's
artists going to. So it took 1 year, and there were some artists that didn't want to go.
And
But,
Bruce Albert is the anthropologist that wrote together with Davi Kopenawa.
Yes, Bruce Albert. And this village is where Davi Kopenawa lives.
Yeah.
And Bruce Albert wrote a very important book with Davi Kopenawa,
Yeah.
Fallen
name-
Falling Sky.
The Fallen Sky.
Falling Sky.
Yes, that was released 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something like, yeah.
So after flying from Boa Vista, 1 hour and a half, we arrived to this small village where 200 or 150 people were living. So basically what I tried to do, it was, I showed them my work. I showed my book, so, and I proposed them to interpret my work through their myths. So I want to know their vision about my work. When I arrived, Davi took the book and began to talk a lot about the works. And they have a very, very rich mythology. It's amazing, like more than 200 myths.
Yeah.
And so they could explain, things in a very, very nice way. So I proposed them that they make some drawings with the myths that could describe what they were, like their interpretation. So we make this workshop. This is Bruce
Yeah.
and Davi. So I stayed there for more or less 12 days. So they were drawing and learning about the mythology, and so these are the drawings that I'm gonna show you, because they made like a lot.
Yeah.
And so these are these spirits, the name of Chapiripe. And when they took Yacoana, the shamans are connected to these spirits.
Yeah.
So basically, I was interested in describe what the shaman could see. When they took Yacoana. Yacoana is a powder that makes them travel to this land of this spiritual land, and be connected with Chapiripe. So these are drawings of these some myths, and this is the drawings of the shamanic body, because as Davi said, they go to the spirits, and the body was reconstructed in a different way, in an upside down way. So these bodies were cutted. Remember that they were looking at my work, so everything related cut and meat, and they were like, so it was as if the field that I was interested, and then they give me back this whole story.
Transformed.
Huh?
And transformed.
And yes. So this is how is the construction of the body of a shaman. So you can see the head is between the legs, and these are the arms. So the bump, or it's on the arms. So the body is inverted. So I took the reference of our Vitruvian man, which is our model of the perfect body related to the space.
Yeah.
No, it's the European, like perfection, no, the model of perfection, with the drawing of Joseca of a shamanic body. Also, I took as a reference the expedition of Alexandre Rodrigues Ferreira. It was the first expedition in Amazonia in 1783. And this is an image of his portfolio. The two illustrators of the expedition were Codina and Freire. And this is an Indian taking Yakoana. And that's the ritual of, the shamanic ritual of aspiring, taking a Yakoana, that I took a photo that I present when I was there. And this is my painting, one of the paintings that I produced to this show. That belongs to Olivier. This is the size of this painting is like this band is like in the scale on the painting. So it's a very high painting. It simulates a piece of paper.
Yeah.
So it's sometimes I'm painting, simulating tiles, and in this case it's simulating paper. So it's an old manuscript showing both the shamanic body and the Vitruvian body, no, together, sobreposto ao outro, juxtaposed. So two totally different orders that are just juxtaposed here. The name of the caption here is Corp Shamanique, and I paint manuscript trouvé dans la région de Demini, 1785, which was the date of Alexandre Rodrigues' expedition. So, the title of the painting I don't have here. It's Caderno de
Caderno de
Viagem.
viagem. No?
Caderno de Viagem, how do you...
Travel diary.
Travel diary.
Travel diary.
Travel diary.
Yes. So I put myself as a how can I say, personagem, a character that was traveling to that place, as Alexandre Rodrigues Ferreira did, and at that time would meet the Yanomamis, no?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the manuscript that could be produced or made at that time. So that's it.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much, for this wonderful tour through your creative process. And, it's really quite special to hear, the materiality of your process, and to be able to see you engaging with history, rereading, reinterpreting the materials, and and this complicated histories of force and desire, right, as you mentioned. So the way we like to do it, Adriana, I hope it's okay with you, we like to collect bundles, cestos de perguntas.
Let's take notes.
And so like we like to 3 or 4 questions, and then feel free
Free
to improvise, to cannibalize, to transform, to create with
All the
those
questions.
questions, right? And then we'll collect another bundle and another bundle, right? So just want to get a sense from people how they are taking in all that you have shared with us, right? So who wants to kick off? Arcadio.
But thank you so much. It's beautiful, really, and the depth and the breadth of what you have shown to us. There are many questions I have in my mind. But one thing that struck me in your presentation and in your work was the importance of books. Books, manuscript, also printed matter, and also paper. And I wanted to ask you about that. If you could speak a little bit more about from the literary point of view, because I'm sure that there are some literary figures there, because it struck me, cannibalism, of course, but also the idea of being printed in the body, as you mentioned several times, printed in the body. There is a book I like very much by Sardui.
Because
Everything started
everything
with
is Sardui.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
It's
you're
I was
right.
telling them, I was
I
telling
mentioned
them.
Yeah.
Escrito en el cuerpo. ¿no?
Escrito
It's
sobre
here,
el cuerpo.
yeah.
Sí, sí.
Yeah, so it struck me
Sardui,
that there
yeah.
is
Yeah,
the
you see?
materiality of the book.
Yeah.
You said that
I
you
had
could
never
not go
mentioned to him.
to the museums.
You told him.
No, I had never mentioned to Arcadio. Arcadio is a magician.
You could not go to the museums, but you did find books. So
Yeah.
books are so
Yeah.
important. And then the simulation.
Yeah.
Sardou is very simulation. So I wanted to ask you about the importance of books, manuscripts, and the idea of printing the body
Yeah.
or printing in the body.
Yeah.
No? That sort of metaphor too, and reality as well.
Yeah.
Great. You had your, yes, and then Marina.
Incrível ele.
É.
The
Preciso.
question I have has to do a little bit with how you learn from the books. But the question is more specifically, where did you then study to develop your technique and knowledge of oils?
Okay, Marina?
Yeah, I think my question is similar to Arcadio's, but because I was thinking of the Yanomami idea of also drawing in the skin. And I think I'm curious to know, if you knew anything about indigenous cultures before, what did you learn there? It was not really clear what to show to them for them to react, because I could think of, even the chapiri, there's a lot of discussions about chapiri and image. So if you were aware of this, or if it was just a coincidence, or and how did this collaboration happen between you, Davi, Rousselet, and the community?
Okay, and Lorraine? And then
I have a simple question. I love the connection you made between catechism and cannibalism. I thought that was really interesting, but I'm wondering if there was a negative reaction from people seeing Christ dismembered body.
Ok,
Uau.
como você quiser.
Hã?
Você lembra das perguntas?
Mais ou menos.
Eu lembro. A primeira é do Arcádio, do Sardui. A segunda é quando você estudou a coisa da pintura. A terceira é a coisa do chapuri e as negative
É,
reactions.
eu vou te perguntando.
Ok.
In 1984, I had 20 years old. I was a friend of mine because I never made any class of art or painting. I'm autodidact. Yeah.
And can I just ask,
She studied
she actually studied engineering
Engineering,
for 2
yes.
years.
And then I gave up, and then I just began to paint. So I didn't know exactly how to use oil paint, the way that I should mix with oil or terebintina or whatever. And then the spirits, I didn't know. So I began to use it, and since it doesn't dry very fast,
and I was like very anxious. I used to put more on the top, and I used to impregnate a lot. So I am a totally non-technical person on oil. Everything that I've done, it was like the wrong way. It was because I didn't learn properly how to use it. So but of course, in the history of art, there are many people as after I was in contact with Dubuffet and other important artists that used to impregnate Chain, Soutine, to impregnate even Van Gogh, the surface with oil. But I did in a very, very thick way. But it was the opposite, the lack of technique that brought me to way, yes.
Yeah.
And so a friend of mine saw like this, the first paintings with a lot of materiality, and gave me a book of, he said, you should read this book, Severo Sarduí. It's written on a body, escrito sobre, which was a book that was a literature book. But yes, and the other day I took that book again, because this was in the 80s, and I thought, all my work is there.
Really?
It was amazing, like the parody, artificiality. In a moment of, it's funny because the history of Brazil doesn't have, in art in Brazil, especially modernism, doesn't have this tradition at all. Like Elliot Sica and Lilia Clark, they are like the opposite of being baroques or when you talk about artificiality, trompe-l'oeil and everything, no theater. So I was in a very specific path that I didn't have any reference in the history of Brazil, no, in the history of art in Brazil, modern art especially. So yes, Severo Sarduí, Otávio Paz, Lezama Lima was like Lezama with the concept of counter-conquest as well, as the mestizo identity, no, because he talks about this Baroque mestizo identity a lot. So they were really my guides, no? And
The indigenous, the Chapuri, if you had studied the
Não
indigenous people,
entendi muito
se
bem.
você estudou os indígenas antes.
Oh, I didn't study the Yanomami before I went there, as with painting. I don't like the idea of have a preconcept. You know, since I'm an artist, I want to have my senses, you know, and to feel, and has something that it's not nice to talk, but has a kind of intuition on things. So this fresh approach that you have, that make you learn, you know, from things in my experience. So my father was in contact with the Yanomamis on the 50s because he was a pilot, military pilot. It was not a good contact. He was not an anthropologist. It was very, they were like building, the militaries are going there to investigate. And so he, when I was a kid, he used to show me the many photos of the contacts with the Yanomami. Actually, is in the catalog of the Fondation Cartier, the photos of my father, because
It's here too,
yes, but I heard about, but I didn't. And I have some meetings with Bruce Albert, that he was talking a lot about his experience with them before, but not. I didn't read anything. I just hear a lot and learned a lot from Bruce. And then I was there.
And what did you show them? Because you said that you gave them some
Ah,
for them to
book,
react
my
to the
book.
Your book.
Yes, the book that he is looking at, it's a book with my works. It's the first book that I made. So they were looking at the books with these works that I show you. The tongue, the dismembering.
E a última questão é da de Jesus Cristo, se você teve muitas reações.
The bad reaction?
Yeah. What kind of reaction?
Protestante,
Se foi o pessoal contra alguém?
evangélico.
Se foram contra as...
I didn't understand very well.
I was wondering if there were religious people that saw your work and felt that it was somehow offensive or disrespectful.
exatamente.
If it must be, but never arrived to me anything special like.
Maybe now, with Bolsonaro.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So let's go for the next round.
But
Go.
sorry, I live in a Baroque Catholic country, so this thing about the body, it's different from Protestant countries. The thing about now becoming Protestant, no, Brazil is
We are becoming,
changing.
changed
But
completely.
the thing about the body in the Baroque is very, very common. Like you use wands, no? The symbol of the Baroque is the heart that is on the hand.
Yeah.
So it's a different kind of mentality, you know? We are like very used to visceral static, much more than
His votos.
the ex votos as well.
Yeah.
So we have this imaginary,
Crucifixion.
We have hands and
The crucifixion.
the
Yeah.
crucifixion,
Yeah.
the theater of the crucifixion,
Yeah.
especially in Mexico. It's a lot of blood and and open bodies and so flash.
Yeah.
So that's.
So we have a few people for the second round. I had listed my name as speaking about the flesh. It's so striking this carnality
Kind of.
behind the tiles,
Mhm.
right? So there is, and then you talked a bit about the tongue, but it's very interesting. But can one read that too, or you read that too, as all those death of the colonial enterprise, all the killing? Is that there as well? Is that this death, this unaccounted for death of the millions, that made another kind of texture in the Americas? That was one question. And then the other question, I love the shaman, the shamanic drawing that you played with, and like this reconnection of the body. Is there an element of healing there that the Yanomami brought to the reading of your, cannibal scenes, this ripping apart of the bodies, right? So because they reconnected the body in a way. They were so that was interesting, this dimension. I almost felt there's a healing as part of a reinterpretation of your work, right? So Pedro?
Yeah, thank you, Adriana. This was great. I'm curious, again, about Sardui as a sort of a first source for everything, and this specific path towards corporeality in your work, because I was thinking that corporeality the body has so many meanings in your work. At the same time, your work is about having no meaning at all. I mean, the corporeality has to do with a certain limits of interpretation, if you mean. So I wonder if you have thought about this. I mean, what to do with our expectations about reading your work through an allegorical lenses, for instance, which would be a failure to my mind. But at the same time, you are telling the history of colonialism there. But at the same time, you are definitely focusing on something that is meaningless or that is beyond meaning, so to speak. So what to do with that?
Thank you.
Você escolhe.
The presentation was dripping with meaning. sort of a flow of so many textures therein. I wanted to ask you more about the idea of simulation, because it comes through in so many palpable ways, but I was curious about how, for example, you're simulating tiles, while the tiles are simulating history in their own right. The Yanomami are simulating your work, and then you're in turn simulating their interpretation of that. So if you could speak a little more about simulation as a method. And also I was very curious about sort of a personal methodological question, why you don't choose to work on tiles per se. Is that
Você não trabalha nos azulejos mesmo? Curiosidade.
Because of simulation.
Is that a kind? Do you think that is a sort of artist's act of resistance against the tile as an artifact that was used as this sort of cover up? As you say, the skin to cover up these wounds. Is that one of the reasons why you consciously chose not to work with tiles? Because I find that very intriguing.
Okay, then one more, and then we get the third round. Yes.
So I also have, thank you so much. I also have questions about the tiles. So it's interesting to me is the way that the tiles were like a modular system. They could be like shipped from Portugal and then assembled. And it's so interesting in the photos of the Convento de São Bento or whatever that you showed where the tiles are missing or flipped, or maybe, and it tends to happen in the borders where those are the places that one would think maybe are more easily mistaken or turned upside down. And I noticed that you simulate that kind of accident in reconstruction in your painting, which is obviously a choice or of intention on your part, whereas in the case of the reorganization of the tiles, it's a matter of accident. So there was that, and then I know you've spoken a little bit about your engagement with the history of art in Brazil, but I couldn't help but think as you were showing us Christ dismembered about like Tiradentes esquartejado, the like famous painting of Pedro Neves, the engagement with the like kind of picturesity of violence in the history of painting in Brazil.
Tiradentes esquartejado, vou achar. She has a work on Tiradentes esquartejado, a whole work.
And I have a whole work about this new order with the tiles as well, the solutions.
Quer que eu te lembre algumas questões?
Lembra.
A primeira do João, se a carnalidade tem a ver com...
I think that my idea of art is art should propose questions, not answer or not being a statement. I personally don't like art when I see like a statement, you know. So the thing about the metaphor of the meat can be many things. Can be also, it's related to erotism, can be related to many things. I think that as a Brazilian, I don't necessarily not have to talk about colonialism and, you know, I don't have to have necessarily, of course the work has to do with that, but not necessarily has to have a political interpretation that way, you know. And we could open the metaphor of the meat to many ways. No? Not necessarily meat means suffering, or meat can mean carnality can be many things. No?
João, tem uma segunda pergunta sobre isso. Healing, chama.
For me, like the tiles means one order that is aseptic, predictable, organized, rational, that is being interrupted for a different order. That is the opposite of this. So I think that what is interesting is how in the same body there is the fold, one fold that can, you know, go one to each other in the same moment. So,
Yes.
so it's uma superposição.
Yeah, you have a
Juxtaposition.
juxtaposition again. It's
Different
not.
order.
It's not.
One could
The
even think-
idea,
yeah.
the idea that like the idea of counter conquest is like that there is a counter conquest. There is not a victim and a algoz,
The enemy.
the enemy and the. So I think these structures should be open to interpretations. And
And then Pedro asks the same thing.
Meaning,
It's meaning or
absence of meaning,
absence of
how
meaning.
to
Quando não
read.
tem significado, que eu acho que é a questão estética. I think it's a coisa aqui é tales and as telas simulam, the simulation.
yeah, o que é? É da simulação.
No, I'm not going to talk. It's everything is about simulation.
Simulation,
Yeah, all the
yes.
time.
Yes,
And then-
and about painting. So the filter and denominator of my work is painting.
yeah.
So if I should use tiles, I should have to use paper, should have to use meat.
Yeah.
I should, And as I'm like from the Sardui school, I like the artificiality parody, and I prefer to filter everything to painting and then making this media as a strategy
That's the
of
strategy.
simulation.
All the time. And then you don't know what simulation
Fala
is.
um pouquinho mais alto.
And then you don't know what's, because we are always talking. That's the problem. So there is a moment that you don't have to know if it's a simulation or not. It's just art, no? And then the idea of e a história da arte com Tiradentes esquartejado.
Oh yes, I have a work, I don't know if you know, about this painting, the Tiradentes of Pedro Américo. I have an installation with paintings where I made a mold.
Yeah.
Ah, não tem como projetar?
I don't think so. Can we project? No, I can try later because you will have to explain, and then it's here.
There, I took that painting and I cut a model and made the painting three-dimensional in a room full of mirrors.
Yeah.
So the body was cutted, but each mirror could see that body in a different way. And I paint the images that the mirror was reflecting, and puts the paintings on the place of the mirrors, and took the model. So when you enter to the room, you have like many mirrors that are paintings that are looking at that body of the composition of this painter called Pedro Américo. He explain about the painting of Pedro Américo.
Yeah, Pedro Américo is an academic painter from Brazil, that, as you know, but probably the others do not know. And then he painted it's a very strong painting, no? Because he painted Tiradentes, that is a kind of national hero from Minas Gerais, from the revolution in Minas Gerais, and then he cut legs and bodies and arms and everything. So for Adriana, it was like how can I say? It was everything because he cut first in the 19th century. Then Adriana decided to cut more and more using mirrors. So
it's a pity that we can't show.
So I can show the.
Do you think we can show the image?
I think so. I'm going to pass
Well,
it.
Tasso arranged that. Let's get one more round. So we had the two of you. Yes, first you. Yeah.
Thank you, Adriana. I would like to know a little bit more about the scale in your creative process. How do you think about? I'm curious about how do you think about the scale? Do you think drawings and paintings? Because scale is really important to you.
Scale.
A scale. About a escala.
A
Como tu joga com escala. Yes, yes. Perfect, yes. So you and then you, yes.
It's going back to Baroque. I wonder if you could talk more how and when you kept contact with Baroque art. It was basically because of Baroque in Minas Gerais. Because although we don't use very much in Brazil neo-Baroque as in Cuba or neo-Barroso in Argentina, no? You have that tradition, no? Because maybe it's more visible in literature than in visual arts. So I think that your work is really unique. And this tradition of the aesthetics of artifice against naturalism, against realism. And, for example, Mário de Andrade wrote about the Aleijadinho. The modernists rediscovered the Baroque. No? And in literature also have this presence, although neo-Baroque is not so used. So I don't know if you could talk more, if it's something that you start studying or just because of the churches.
Okay, good. One more. Yes, please.
Thanks. Building upon the Severo Sartori line of thought, I would like to ask you about how do you feel?
Okay, a bit louder.
Oh, I'm sorry. Building on the Severo Sartori line of thought, I remember that at a certain point he mentioned the relation between simulation and transvestite. How do you feel about that relation?
Simulação e travestimento.
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 Com Sartori.
Okay, 3 questions, then we get one last round.
First one is first. So this is Tiradentes esquartejado. And
This
then
is the
traditional paint, Pedro Américo.
você fala.
You talk. Não, eles querem que você fale de escala. E eu vou botar a sua obra agora. Okay. Primeiro escala. Isso é bacana para você, o tamanho das imagens. Aqui elas são quase projeções.
Normally, the scale follows the model. Like I like when for these paintings that I show, when the scale is the scale of a real tile. But for Inhotim, for instance, I grow the scale of a tile to 100 times. So a tile become like this size. And then I cover the whole surface with painting. So because at that moment, it was the first, in the end of 90s, I began to work with architecture, to have this relation with architecture. And then, so I wanted like to cover the whole wall with paintings. And also I used to work with ruins, jerked meat ruins, the meat ruins that were pieces of walls with meat inside. So I had this vision, with architecture. So my painting came from, saiu da tela, came out of the screen and began to gain the space. So the scale changed a lot that time. Yeah. So the scale is related, I think, to the necessity of the work and
Uma coisa de novo do neobarroco, coisa que está mais na literatura e menos na
yes,
pintura.
the neo-Baroque is much more in literature than in art.
Yeah.
And when I was in contact with the Baroque, it was the Baroque itself, like 17th century and Ouro Preto, the Baroque from Minas, and then Bahia and Pernambuco and Maranhão. So it was in even if I was a contemporary art, I went to the sources because I did not have any interpretation, visual interpretation that maybe Maria Martins, but that could translate the feeling.
And it was also kitsch, no? There was a moment that, remember when you use bordalo, and then the idea of being kitsch.
Yes, it was later on.
Later on. Simulação e travestimento.
Oh, that's, eu não sei falar sobre isso.
Yeah, so it's fine. Well, so then you have here. if you want-
Simulation travesti. It's who asked me?
He.
Simulation is like it's a strategy that I use in my work. Like as I simulate tiles instead of using tiles, simulating meat instead of using meat, and travestismo. I don't know this concept. Yes, but this. Yes, but this concept sometimes I understand that is because Severo Sarduy criticized Dors, no?
Yeah.
What's his
But
name?
the-
No sei que Dors.
But the idea of travestism is there.
Yes,
Yeah.
he was criticized because he related to the Baroque with something that is artificial, it's not natural at all. And there is this man, Eugenio Dors, that connects Baroque with naturalism and nature. And I think he was like, he was using like this thing about travestis that is an artificialism, you know, to counterpoint this other concept, saying that the Baroque is something totally anti-natural.
Paródia, né?
It's
A parody.
it's a parody and so on.
So we are coming to the end. Okay, but you know you mentioned that the series they are unfinished, right? So you didn't put that.
No.
So
Final point.
there's no final point. So I think we are all curious. What are you working on right now? Are you going back to which series, or you know, or what are you doing right now?
Right? Yeah, I can explain. Say, I'm working for my next show at the Gagosian in 2020 September. And I've been, I've lived in Mexico. It was like outside Brazil, the only country that I live was in Mexico in the 90s. And I made one painting at that time on Talavera. But then 2 or 3 years ago, I began to study and collect material about Talavera, and also about pre-Columbian ceramic, which is a whole life world, like it's huge. And I've been collecting materials and studying. So I think my work is going, I want to make a series a little bit touching the Talavera in that direction, and something with pre-Columbian.
And she's going to
ceramic,
build
especially
a new
in
wall.
Shola.
You are going to build a new wall.
Yes, a new wall. I will build a wall.
Yeah, that's the
Yes,
wall.
the wall. And
Yeah.
it's funny because in Portuguese we have 2 words for wall, muro e parede. And in English, when I try to explain muro and parede, they are the same thing, and that's very difficult for me. Try to
Explain
help
the
me,
difference between
please.
So we
Someone
have
help
many
me.
people here
Muro and
working with
parede.
languages
Yeah.
in multiple
Someone-
languages,
someone
inside,
help me.
outside. You know.
Yeah.
So Adriana Varejão, we are so grateful for your presence here. We all learned so much from you. We love your work, but we also want to thank your generosity. You know, many of us have worked with you, like Lily, but we also work with you in this book, Unfinished, you know, that you collaborated with Lily. You and your team made the images available to us. So you love books, you learn from books, and we are so grateful, you know, that you give us ideas and images for our unfinished books and intellectual projects as well. You left us with so much to think with. And Lily, thank you so much for making this possible. And again, thank you.